transmitting from Sector 14845. By the authority of the Guardians of the Universe, Blog of Oa Lanterns, Myron Rumsey and Bill Giancoli proclaim the podcast of Oa. You have been chosen to receive this transmission because you are without fear.
The podcast of Oa.
Welcome back to the podcast of Oa. This is episode 107. I'm Bill Giancoli, and I'm joined as always as the guardian and guru of the blog of Oa and also the podcast of Oa, my friend Myron Rumsey. How are you, Myron?
Good, Bill. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's just great to be sitting down a nice quiet evening and talk a little Green Lantern. We're actually covering quite a bit in this episode. We're going to actually have two Hal Jordans of the Green Lantern Corps, issues 4 and 5. And then we're going to do some listener feedback and some news. And then we're going to talk about our favorite book, or at least my favorite book. I don't know about you. Green Lanterns 4 through 7. Sorry if the sarcasm was a little thick there.
And it's been a little while since we've recorded, and I just wanted to apologize to listeners who look for us for consistent content. We both work in education, and you just started a new job in the same building as I'm in, and
yeah, right.
The start of the school year and the whole month of September is probably the busiest we get. So it's been a bit of a hectic month. And also in the last month, you and I both aged up a year. So
yeah.
So
we're celebrating birthdays, living lives, and it's tough. And it's not like an excuse, but it's just a reality of what we're in too, and what we do. And I think it's great that we have this time right now.
Absolutely. I look forward to recording the episodes and talking Green Lantern, and hearing what people, and fans have to say. You kind of jokingly talked about the Green Lanterns book, and I have been very critical of this series. And as we start talking about the issues more, we'll get into it a little bit more. But it's interesting to hear how people talk about this book, because some people are really loving it. Some people are really not loving it, and then there's a bunch of people that are kind of in the middle that are like, this first arc is kind of so-so, but there's potential there, and I'll hang on to see how it goes. So I think it's a very divisive book when you get right down to it. But I'm glad to be here, and I'm happy to be talking some comics with you, Bill. So why don't we jump ahead, take a bit of a break, and start talking comics.
Sounds good.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of Oa.
Bill, we're going to kick into the comic book chat, and we're going to talk about Green Lanterns number 4 through 7. We're a bit behind, so it makes sense for us to talk about all 4 of these books in one big shot. And we're talking about Red Dawn. And issue 4 picks up with Jessica Cruz possessed by the red energy. She's gone all full rage on, and Simon tries to rescue her, and he brings her out of it. There's a lot of self-doubting, which you could probably say about every issue. There's a lot of self-doubting, and then we pick things up and go on through the story. And as a long-term fan, I know I'm opinionated about it. But Bill, I know you're still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively new to the Green Lantern universe. You've been reading about 10 years, maybe?
Yeah, I guess I would. Well, probably more than that now at this point. Let's see, Rebirth. Where would Rebirth come along?
2004.
2004. Okay, so yeah, a little bit over 10 years.
Yeah. So, from your perspective, as somebody who's newer into the whole mythology, what do you think about these 4 issues? And what did you like? What didn't you like? What's your overall take on it?
I think, we could sit here and we could dissect it, and there's good parts and there's bad parts. I think from the very beginning, I said I kind of like the idea of having 2 very new, fresh Green Lanterns in this scenario and see how they handle the powers of the ring and everything. I think what I'm coming to right now, and I kind of like the having a buddy kind of cop, cop partner kind of scenario working out. But I think what I'm realizing now is that I just don't know if I like the characters. And that's where I think it falls a little bit flat. And we jump in with Rage, which is a very powerful ring, and, Atrocitus, who, it seems like one of the weaker bad guys that you would battle anymore. I feel like after what happens with the Red Lanterns, and then he's just seeming like he is not as strong as he once was. And he looked great in this, and that's a credit to. This is the first time where he was drawn. He looked great, but it fell flat. I mean, the story itself fell flat. The what she had to overcome, Jessica Cruz, and I would almost say Jessica Cruz was probably, this arc was kind of the center of it a little bit more than Simon Baz.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So she seemed to be more of the focus, and it where they had a moment that you think would be great, it almost, it's kind of weird, and I'm kind of going back here, but I don't believe the moment where she makes like the lotus, I believe it's like a lotus flower that destroys the Hell Tower. I believe that's not a complete splash, is it? Splash page?
I'd have to go back and look at that issue. I actually have that issue open right now. Let me just scroll back through it a little bit. It seemed to me that when she makes the construct, it is a full page splash, but let me double check. I know when they embrace each other and they've kind of gotten past their animosity, it goes, it is a full page splash. When she flies out of the Rage Tower and it's being destroyed, the Hell Tower, and it's being destroyed, that is a 2-pager.
That is a 2-page. See, and I kind of lost that in digital, because I was going to say that kind of, helps sell that a little bit more, Yeah. So I lost a little bit on that, but it still didn't seem as powerful, the scene, as you would hope that it was going to go for. And then it kind of throws you a twist in the end there with, and I forget the blue guy's name there, the new Guardian.
Rami with an A. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Rami. So Rami, he's coming out and he's like, hey, I need to see Hal Jordan. They discover him, they meet him, and he opens up another ring, the Phantom Ring, and then it just kind of goes to like, okay, what are we going to get into next? You almost have my attention, and then it's like, hey, we're going to slow this down a bit. And it's like, and that's, I was waiting for them to kick it into high gear, and they decided to throw it down a gear. They downshifted on me, and I'm feeling like, I don't know if I'm at like a halt, like a kind of a stop of where are we going to go with these characters. And you've heard me, even with my argument with Superman versus Batman, I'm all about superheroes doing superhero things. And watching them use their superpowers to bake cookies is not one of them. And it just lost me. And it's a shame, because there are like, I think, diamonds in the rough there with the direction and ideas that they were going to go with. But then you got to have them doing something. I would have been happy if they were baking cookies and then they were like, oh, they have a real quick call to do anything. It could have been like stop a train from going over a cliff, anything. And then they went back to making cookies, or did like a shrug. Oh, well, we don't make cookies tonight, or something, the dialogue of them going back and forth and trying to get into each other's past of what, and getting as deep as they are, just is not of interest to me. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame, because I think there were some diamond roughs. Again, fell very flat for me.
I feel very much the same way. The first thing I think that hurts the series is the art, because we've had so many different artists so far, and it's inconsistent throughout. So it makes it difficult when Simon's, his gun disappears one panel, and it comes back the next panel. Something that I found completely jarring in the issue that they beat Atrocitus in. I just kind of thought Simon gets his arm broke in one part of the issue, and we're talking about issue number 6, and he gets his arm broke, and he's got it in the cast, and he and Jessica embrace, which is great. I thought it was a good character moment. I don't want to poo-poo the whole thing. I thought it was a good character moment when they accepted each other. But you see him in a sling, and then they fly off to rescue Sarah, and he's got no sling in his arm, and he's acting like he's perfectly fine. So there's not even any consistency amongst the issue itself, which that makes it difficult for me to follow when it's that inconsistent. It's not like it's a little thing. The gun, you might be able to just excuse the gun thing as an oversight, but if it was Batman and he didn't have a utility belt one panel, and he had his utility belt the next panel, it would be an issue there too. So it's not really any different to me. But the whole arm cast thing, that's a huge oversight. And who's editing this to make sure that the content's right? And that's part of the issue I have with it, is the inconsistency of things and the inconsistency with the lore itself. You've got Scalox and Zelia Zox, two characters who died really dramatic deaths in the Red Lantern series considerably some time ago. And this was when Guy led the Red Lantern Corps, and they're showing up in the Red Lanterns now, and there's no way for them to be back. I mean, and people said, well, Atrocitus can bring people back. Well, he's been able to do that, but not just at whim. We saw what happened when there was a Sinestro Lobo crossover, and Lobo killed a bunch of Red Lanterns, including Dexter and Atrocitus, and Atrocitus is able to bring themselves back inside the confines of the same location. He wasn't able to bring Rancor back. He also wouldn't be able to bring back Zelia Zox and Scalox. There's no way for him to do that. It occurred so long before, on a planet Atrocitus wasn't even at, and let alone the fact that they betrayed Atrocitus. So it wouldn't happen. And then you have, to me, the inconsistency of, okay, we're supposed to think of Simon and Jessica Cruz as newbies. And we already know that Simon Baz isn't a newbie, but okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, take him as a newbie. But he's fending off several Red Lanterns with no problem whatsoever. So you can't call him a newbie who doesn't know what he's doing on one hand and have him holding off Red Lanterns on the other. So I had an issue with that. Issue with Sarah being in a bubble that exists long after Simon and Jessica leave inside of this airtight container. She would have suffocated by now. A. B.
Well, yeah, that was one thing I wasn't sure what was exactly happening there.
Yeah.
Because she was like, oh god, it was getting so with my sweat and everything. So I'm like, nothing's escaping. So
right.
Yeah.
Stuff like that kind of bugs me. And the other thing I had an issue with, and I understand what Sam Humphries is trying to do. And Jessica Cruz is supposed to be a character riddled by anxiety. She can't go to the grocery store. She can't interact with people. And I know there's supposed to be a reason why she got the ring, but I had a real hard time reading her cowering behind a rock while her partner is getting his butt kicked by Atrocitus, and that being acceptable. I'm reading these books as inspirational heroes, people to aspire to be, and I didn't feel that was really a good... I mean, it was a step backwards. Every time you think she's making a little step forward, it's a little step backwards. And maybe for folks who have anxiety disorders and things, maybe that's the norm, but I'm not sure it's what I want to read about. And I'm not trying to disenfranchise anybody, I'm not, but it's not an interesting read to me. And then when she, in one issue, is cowering behind a rock and then she's able to talk herself out of it, I thought it downplayed how hard this is for people on a day-to-day basis to survive and function in society when you've got somebody who just says, okay, take a deep breath. Yeah, I can do it. Okay, suddenly, rings on, I can do it. I had an issue with that. I didn't think she earned it.
Well, I don't even know if it's about earning or what. I think, again, to speak to what you're saying about as far as the anxiety, the angle of her dealing with having this type of anxiety, part of me really feels that going from I have trouble even thinking about leaving my house to I'm battling Atrocitus and some scary looking Red Lanterns with a power that I'm not even sure how to use is too much of a stretch for me to jump onto.
Yeah.
I get the whole you're a coward and you have to learn how to believe into yourself, and the coward becomes a hero and stands up and becomes brave, and that's an evolution of a character, absolutely. But we're getting into a complicated subject of anxiety and what levels of anxiety there are, and people have anxiety. I have anxiety. I've frozen many. It's something I've dealt with all my life. And I have coping mechanisms, and I have ways that I've been able to get myself in there. I mean, we're talking social freezing in the middle of a whole bunch of people kind of anxiety. And it can be crippling, and it's a shame. But that doesn't mean that you telling me an interesting story with somebody in it automatically makes me say I need to connect with this person. It's just not a strong enough story for a topic that's pretty misunderstood, and not only that, but is an array of levels that you're now putting in a action comic, and that's what they're dealing with. And I get the trying to take a shot at an angle that maybe a lot of people wouldn't go to, and I applaud that. That's ballsy in a way. However, I don't know. It doesn't ring true to what anxiety actually, how it can really actually cripple you, in the sense of like where she would have a power ring to begin with. I mean, it's a process for some people. And I think it just doesn't. Let's put it this way: I'm not going to like it because I can't just give my thumbs up to this book because it's taking a chance at talking something like this. I would almost say it would be interesting if it was a superpower she innately had, minus the Green Lantern ring, whatever it is. It's like a superpower she innately had and is trying to keep it to herself, and this has led to her anxiety.
Well,
yeah. And then there you're like saying you're now dealing with that kind of mental and like the anguish that might be going through. This is like, I really have a lot of anxiety, but I'm going to hold on to this ring.
Well, and I thought that when she was Power Ring and she had Volthoom's ring on her, and the ring was basically demeaning her, she overcame that, and so it's almost a regression of character in a way. But I thought that her as Power Ring was such a much more powerful character because the ring was literally representing that voice that people hear. And I thought that was kind of cool. But to get back to the story, like you, I thought the ending was anticlimactic because once they got past destroying the Hell Tower, and you have Atrocitus in this rage of losing the Hell Tower, and you think the good guys have won, you find out it really didn't matter anyway. So it kind of undercut that moment, at least for me it did. And then you get the whole thing, like you said, with Rami showing up with the ring. I did like how it ended in terms of knowing that the Rage Seed is still there, and that's going to be revisited. That was interesting. I enjoyed Bleez's journey and where Bleez is now more so than our two lead characters, to be honest. I think Bleez now seeing that there might be another way, and not wanting and not being afraid to reveal that to Atrocitus. To me, that's very intriguing. But then it all kind of broke down for me again in the most recent issue when we talked about them making cookies, and it was a good character driven issue. But like you, I felt it was unbalanced because that's all that was in this issue, and to me that wasn't terribly interesting. I'm like when Hal came home is an example to pull the previous series into this. When Hal came home, we had the whole thing with Sonar, and so Hal's personal life was a part of the story, and we got to see some really cool things. But then there were other things that went on action-wise, plot-wise, that was more than just a character piece. And where I really struggled was the fact that, okay, let's say you and I are newbies and we've got these power rings and we're not really sure what we're doing, but we just defeated the Red Lanterns and we're confronted by a Guardian who says, I have the most scary weapon in the universe that everybody's going to want, and I need you to protect me. Now, we're both members of the Justice League, and rather than take Rami to the Justice League, which would be the logical thing to do, we let him float around in the attic and scan for bad guys while we make cookies. And to me, that was a whole... I don't know. I had a real hard time with that because those aren't responsible characters. I realize they're human and we're trying to write them with flaws and yada, yada, yada. But at what point does this become a bad idea? You know, we had a little bit of progression. Now we're going back again, and these people are acting, and I'll be blunt, I think they acted kind of stupid. I realize, you know, family obligations are one thing, but when you've got a threat like this, that's huge. And why wouldn't you use the fact that you're members of the Justice League who obviously have more experience with this, to make sure it's safe rather than leave it out there? And
right.
That's kind of where I struggled with that whole thing a bit. But I did like the character study, and I've liked some of the character work here and there where you see them exploring their interactions together. My concern is now that we've gotten in the first 7 issues their relationship kind of patched up and they're further along, where's the tension going to come from? You know, are we moving too fast for a long form story? Because my concern, and I always have this concern when we do these kind of introduce new characters to legacy lines and so on, is at some point what attracts people to them changes because the characters have to mature and grow. And at some point they just become in this case, another Green Lantern. I look at how DC has struggled to balance Kyle out now that he's no longer the new guy. He eventually has to become an experienced guy. And then what do you do with him? Because that's what attracted him to a lot of people. Eventually, we're going to have that problem with Simon and Jessica. I don't know. I struggle to rally behind the characters. I struggle to really be supportive of the book, and I want to be. And I hope people know me well enough to know that I love this mythology more than anything in comics, and it's very important to me on a personal level. I want to see it succeed, but to me, this just isn't the right way. And I'm really having a hard time with it. If I were not buying this book to be able to review it on the podcast and review it on the website, I probably wouldn't buy it. And that's to me is an indictment on the book's quality to me, or at least how it appeals to me as an individual. And I know that there are people out there, and I mentioned it in the opening of the show, there are people who think that these characters are great. And that's nice for them. I just worry that if they're new to the mythology, they're not getting a proper introduction to it. And that we're taking a divisive fan base and making it even more divisive and causing more fracturing of a fan base. Because now you're going to have people, I've already seen it online, well, if they do Green Lantern in the Justice League movies, it should be either Simon Baz or Jessica Cruz. Well, you've already got the Hal fans and the John fans that are exclusive to one or the other fighting about who's supposed to be, who it should be and who it shouldn't be. And now you've got a whole other faction of people that want something completely different. And how does that help anybody? I think that Jessica Cruz as a character may have been far more interesting if she wasn't a Green Lantern. And I'm not sure why we needed to have more Green Lanterns, but it's water under the bridge, it's done. But to me personally, I think Jessica Cruz would have been more interesting as another type of character rather than yet another Green Lantern. I think the DC took the easy way out. They wanted to appeal to a female demographic. They wanted to show diversity in their line, and it's easier to take a franchise that allows you to just add more characters and do that and latch them onto that mythology than it is to do something creative and create a brand new character that's going to stick, because we all know that tends not to work. Look at Batwoman as an example. They created a new character, tied it to the Batman franchise, and it still didn't work. So and I understand it's hard to create new characters, but I think that's the challenge, and that's where good writers can make all the difference in the world. And I'm just, to me, that's just not resonating for me. And I'm not looking for somebody who's just like me to read about. I'm looking for aspirational characters. I struggle sometimes with the just like me syndrome, where I have to have something either, incredibly in common with the character, either ethnicity, religious background, sexuality, whatever. I fear that we continue to raise children who feel they have to have that. I know that, young people look for someone like themselves, but it's our job as parents to teach them to look beyond the gender, to look beyond their sexual preference, to look beyond their skin color. So I want people to be able to relate to a character because it's a good character, regardless of what they look like or what language they speak. Or, we have to evolve as a people. And I just think sometimes we start catering to things like this and we hinder ourselves. But that's my soapbox.
And I mean, you're not, I guess, obviously you're not wrong. It's your perspective, but it's, it's one of those things where I think you're right in that it would be better if she didn't belong as a part of the Green Lantern mythos, because it just doesn't seem that that's where that ring is. Like we joked that the Phantom Ring, it's like anybody can use it, and we're like, well, at this point, the Green Lantern, the Green Ring is kind of choosing really anybody as well.
Yeah, we don't know why we don't know why the ring chose her. But you bring up the Phantom Ring. Do you think the Phantom Ring is a good idea, a bad idea, or are you in a wait and see mode?
You never know. I mean, who knows? Things might turn out to be better. I mean, after a while, like, what was I going to say? The Red Lanterns, when they got Guy Gardner, involved, like, things really changed, and it got, it turned me around as a believer. However, having another ring, it seems with all the other rings that we have out there, it's really, I just can't be a believer right now. I'm game for anything, so I'll read to see where this goes. That's kind of what we do here. So, but I'm kind of like, do we really need to add another ring? Because we're bleeding outside the spectrum, not only with Volthoom and like Power Ring, we're now getting into this Phantom Ring, and it's starting to make you wonder. And now Hal and Sinestro can make their own rings. It's, I don't know, it's getting to the point where it's becoming oversaturated.
Well, it reminds me of the line from The Incredibles. If everybody has powers and everybody's super, then nobody is.
Right.
And, the Phantom Ring is interesting. First of all, I have to lodge a protest. It should have been Seafoam, but okay.
Yeah, I know. If it was Seafoam, that would have made it so much better.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Why is it Jessica Cruz a Seafoam?
But in terms of needing another ring and what the ring does, it looks like it's a ring that anyone can use, but we still don't know what its power set is. I've seen some images that show all the colors coming out of it. So I've been kind of having this theory that maybe this ring can channel any one of the emotional spectrum powers at a time, but just one at a time. Based on what the wearer feels. I'm just spitballing it. It could be something completely different. But what's fascinating about the concept is, if anybody could get the ring, think of it in the hands of Mongol or Doomsday or Lex Luthor or some of these other beings that can't get a ring for whatever reason, because they're not chosen. But in the hands of the wrong person, you could have an incredibly powerful villain. Now, flipped it around the other way. What if someone like Wonder Woman or Superman got the ring? How powerful they could be, what a huge force for good they could be. So I can see a lot of storytelling potential there. I'm kind of in a wait and see mode like you. I'm not sure we really need another ring, but I'm willing to see where it goes. My concern, and I talked just a little bit ago about them not taking Rami to the Justice League. We know through solicitations that this whole family thing storyline continues on for a couple more issues before they start going into the Phantom Ring story. And to me, I'm a little disappointed that we're not going into another arc right away, especially as important as we've made this Phantom Ring seem to be, that we're going to have, I think next issue they're talking about Baz's gun and why he has a gun, and they're going to have a conversation about it. And I think those might be good character bits, but I think there needs to be better balance. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say about this series is it's not, I wonder if it's going to read well in trade, because one of the things one of my pet peeves about the series is that every issue starts out with, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." And in every issue, we have the characters introducing themselves. And I guess that's okay in a bi-weekly book. I question that as being overkill already. But in a trade, can you imagine reading that 6 or 7 times in one trade?
Right.
I just think it's... I don't know. I don't want to say it's lazy. I understand, there's the amount of inner monologuing in this series bothers me. I'd rather have the understanding of what's going on in their mind through their dialogue and their actions with some thought balloons or some inner monologue. But there was one issue where the monologuing was 70% or greater of the entire issue, and a little bit goes a long way. So I don't know. It's not my style of book, and I guess that's where I'm struggling. And I don't want to discourage anybody else who likes it, but I can't get on board with it myself.
You likes what you likes.
Yeah, that's I guess what it is.
Yeah, and I mean that's really ultimately for me. That's where I'm at. Is like it is not selling me, but these are the reasons why it's not selling me, or selling to me, because I don't know. I haven't resonated with any of the characters. Baz, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I could see where he's going. But I think you've made the point before that he doesn't always seem like the Baz that we've seen and some of the other. And I would almost be happy if it was just Baz.
Yeah, I could see that. I've kind of felt bad here and there where I know when the series first started, I had a person leave a comment on one of my reviews, and she was disappointed in me because she expected to come to a Green Lantern fan site and see support for the book. And I felt bad on one hand, but then, I had last year when I went to Baltimore Comic-Con, I had a chance to talk with Ethan Van Sciver on and off all weekend. And we were chatting about the state of the Green Lantern book at the time. And I was telling him how I struggled sometimes because the whole reason why I do this is because I love the characters and I want to be a good ambassador for them. So I struggle with what happens when it's just not good, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And I chatted with him about it as a creator, and I respect his opinion. And he said to me, he goes, if you're going to have integrity, you've got to be true to yourself, and you have to be willing to upset some people, but then they're going to respect your opinion overall if you're fair-handed. And I try to be fair-handed. I try to put aside, when I review the books, put aside my overall dislike of the premise. I'm trying to move past that and look at each book as its own thing. But when there's so many flaws in continuity and in the mythos and in unbalanced storytelling and in lack of continuity just within the issue, I can't help but point that out. That's part of why I write reviews. And I don't write them because I'm trying to be critical. I'm not a critic, air quotes. I'm a fan who's writing their opinion of a book. And if people like my overall opinion of a book and they've come to find that my taste is similar to their taste and they're going to look to me for a recommendation, I have to be true to myself. And I know my reviews are on the lower end. If you go to comicbookroundup.com, they're like the Rotten Tomatoes of comic book reviews. And they pull my reviews for every Green Lantern issue. And I go out after I've written my review and look to see what other reviewers say. And some people gave this most recent issue with the cookies a 9.5. I couldn't give it a 9.5. I gave it a 5. I thought it was better than the previous issue in terms of just character study. I even thought
that was high.
Well, yeah, I know some people will. And I don't mean to turn people off, and I hope that people don't turn away from me because I am critical of this book. I'm trying to be fair and even-handed, and like I said, I'm not reading it for my enjoyment, and I'm trying to find things in it I like. But I have to be honest, and it's funny because when I was talking with Ethan, I was talking about the state of the Green Lantern book at the time, and this was before the Sonar run, and you and I were not exactly thrilled with where Robert Venditti was taking the book, and how things were being executed and so on. And I told him I was struggling with trying to be true to myself, but not trying to be disrespectful at the same time. And I took his words to heart, and it's kind of funny because when I was critical of the premise of Green Lanterns, he said to me, "Hey, listen, I know where it's going to go. It's okay, but even then, I can't just overlook that because Ethan says it's going to be okay either. So I kind of felt bad because he gave me advice on one hand, and I'm following the advice, but it's not necessarily sitting well with individuals either. But I can't change who I am, and I love this mythology, and I hope that people will. I am fine if they want to agree to disagree. That's fine. I don't want to ruin anybody's enjoyment, but at the same time, I'm looking at these books and trying to give a recommendation to somebody who may not be reading it and looking to see, is this a book worth picking up? And I'm going to point out the good things and the bad things. And I try to, when you read the reviews, I may give it a low score, but I try to at least say something positive about every issue.
Well, we try to say positive.
All right, then. Well, let's wrap it up, and let's talk about a very interesting listener comment we got. All right?
All right.
All right, we'll be back after the break.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of Oa. You need to keep listening, otherwise I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
So, Myron, we don't necessarily have a listener's email, but we have a comment from Greg, because I guess a few episodes ago we were debating, well, I don't think we were debating, but we were asking or questioning Hal Jordan's religion, if his, I believe, mother was Jewish and his father was Catholic, or vice versa.
Catholic father, Jewish mother. Yep, and this was back in Podcast of Oa episode 95, and we were and we were talking about the Green Lantern Dark Side War one shot that Tom King wrote, and you and I were having a conversation about, with Hal's upbringing, with having a Catholic father and a Jewish mother, what does that make Hal? Is he Jewish? Is he Catholic, or whatever? And Gregory posted a really neat comment on the blog of Oa post for that podcast episode. And he was talking about, he was listening to back episodes and getting caught up. And he really enjoyed the conversation we were having and talked about the religion thing. And it was interesting because he said he chuckled at your comment that you thinking about me thinking that you'd be an authority on it, and then thought he'd leave a comment because he knew, or at least potentially, what the answer to the question is. And he says, as to Hal having a Catholic father and a Jewish mother, and what does that make Hal, the answer is oddly complicated, and yet in the final analysis, Bill, your comment, both, is probably accurate. And he goes on. He goes in a little bit.
Of course,
yeah, of course. You know,
authority on this.
Yes, well, you know, Father Bill, and so he talks about Catholic tradition, and I'm not going to read the whole post because it's rather lengthy, but he talks about in Catholic tradition that parents commit to raising their child Catholic as part of their marriage vows and whatnot. So what we don't know is if Martin and Jessica had a Catholic wedding and followed through on that commitment, despite Jessica Jordan not being Catholic, Hal would have been baptized and therefore Catholic. But on the other hand, in terms of the ethnic side of Judaism, as a race rather than religion, Jewishness is reckoned as coming from the mother's side, especially in a mixed marriage, such as Hal's parents. Therefore, Hal is ethnically Jewish. As far as the religious side of that, the question becomes, like the Catholic possibility in baptism, was Hal circumcised by a rabbi at a bris ceremony? So we don't, you know, I'm really glad Gregory tried to explain that, because I'm not versed in either faiths. So it was interesting to see that there really isn't a clear-cut question. And so it depends on how his parents raised him. And also, ultimately, and Greg really points this out well, that what religion Hal is depends on his own choices as he grew up. Did he receive a sacrament of confirmation if he was raised Catholic? Did he continue to live according to church precepts? Or would he be a lapsed Catholic? On the other hand, did he have a bar mitzvah? And we really don't know the answer to any of those questions. But Gregory also provided a really cool link that I'm going to put in the show notes for this episode. And it's a really interesting article. It's long, but it's a pretty thorough discussion of this exact question. And I think that's where Tom King stated he got the whole idea and decided to make it canon. And it concludes that however Hal was raised, his role as a Green Lantern fills the place of religious affiliation in his life, which may very well be true. But a very interesting article. And Gregory, I thank you so much for posting that comment, because it wasn't anything that nagged at me, but you always kind of wonder how some of these things play out and where do writers get their ideas for things and how things work. And so I really appreciate the fact that you posted a link to that article, because I did find it highly interesting. And I like your explanation of it, because it helps me understand where things go. Because as we talk about, you know, everybody talks about diversity in the DC Extended Universe movies and stuff, and people always look at Hal as the bread and butter white guy, and I think this added a whole nother layer to Hal, because technically he's Jewish from an ethnicity standpoint, and so that adds a little bit more to the ethnicity of the characters we have to deal with. So I found it very interesting. So again, thank you so much, Gregory. Bill, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I guess really the bottom line is we have to find out if Hal has been circumcised or not. I don't know, in your wealth of knowledge.
That's something I don't know, and I really don't want to know.
It's going to come out as like, issue 12, Sinestro was the Moyle.
Considering how much nudity has been in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern book these last 2 issues, maybe we'll find out after all. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be a twist. Well, thank you very much, Greg, for that comment and informing us so that I can make an immature joke. But thank you very much, and always feel free to give us your feedback. We're always looking forward to it.
Hey, maybe we know now know what Hal made his power ring out of. Okay.
That one.
Well, thanks again, Greg, and we appreciate the listener comment. And we hope to hear from anybody else that has anything they want to ask, or a question they want to pose, or an observation they want to share.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Myron, we're going to talk about Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. This is 4 and 5. We're combining the issues. We're recording on the night that the 5th issue came out. So we see Hal fight off some Yellow Lanterns and lose. We see a naked Guy Gardner. We find out that Guy Gardner, his strength is kind of opening doors for this Fear Engine, and we'll talk about that. But what was your overall? I mean, you're liking this series. We definitely get that. I'm liking this series. Do you think it's continuing to, go in the direction you're hoping?
I'm really, really happy with this book. I think it's interesting that I don't think we got to see Robert Venditti's best writing when it was in the New 52. I definitely think that he had to deal with a number of things. In fact, I know he did, because some of the things that we talked about off mic when I interviewed him a little while ago, that there were some things that interfered with the story he wanted to tell and how he wanted to tell it. And I think this really shows some of his strengths as a writer, and so I'm really happy with that. I think he's done an admirable job of balancing the book out between action moments and character beats and subtle humor that doesn't hurt the characters when the humor is there. This is everything I would want to see in a Green Lantern Corps book. I really wish that it was 2 different books, to be honest with you, but that we're getting it twice a month really kind of makes up for that, and you don't feel like, with the schedule the way it is, that you're getting shorted in any way, because you're getting 40 pages a month. Yeah, you're paying twice as much, but you're getting 40 pages a month, and we're seeing all the various elements. I will make no. I won't deny that I was very critical of the decisions, and I was very concerned about all these characters being crammed into one series. But I'm really happy with what we're seeing here so far, and with issue 4. You see, Sinestro kind of gets surprised. We think that based on what happened in issue 3, that they're about to dump Hal Jordan in Sinestro's lap, and it turns out to be Guy Gardner. And just the shock and surprise of it not being Hal was neat. And of course, we've got Ethan Van Sciver back for visuals, so everything looks the way that Ethan always draws things, with a great deal of detail. And like in issue 4, when you see the giant skeletal yellow fist slamming down on Guy Gardner, it's such a great set of visuals. And then what I thought was really done well is when you see that scene where they transition to Soranik Natu operating on Hal. You don't know at first if it's even her, and then when you find out it's her, you really don't know what her intent is, and it's done, I think, intentional to make you think that she has not, she's not turned against her father. and that she's doing something against Hal, and then you find out later on when you see her, please Hal, don't die kind of thing. I thought that was really a nice piece of work that they did, where they kind of built it up and then they paid it off in the same issue. And it's, I don't know, these issues have been really neat. I liked seeing that when Guy goes after Sinestro and he makes the truck, and Sinestro is his traditional Papa self. This giant truck construct is coming at Sinestro, and he's not even flinching. I mean, that's what kind of guy Sinestro is, and I thought it was great. I thought it was a nice balance of everything we've come to expect from a Green Lantern story, and we talked about this, I think, during the Sinestro run, that it looked like Sinestro, that book was like an event inside of a book, and a self-contained event. And I get the same feeling with this first arc. This feels like an event book, and that's really exciting to me. And to see, everything that's going on. The scene where Guy Gardner's, he's standing there naked, and Sinestro doesn't know he's naked, and then he turns around and sees that he's naked, and he's got that, shake your head look. And then Guy gets the beer can out of the six-pack out of his backpack and crushes the can against his head. And an interesting behind-the-scenes thing is, originally the script just called for Guy to crush the can in his hand, and Ethan was like, well, it would be cooler and it'd be more in character for Guy if he crushed it against his own head. And that shows some of the things that Ethan brings in a collaborative way to the story, because he knows the characters so well. I just thought it was done really, really well. And that's just talking about issue number 4. Then you get to today's issue, and it's more of the same, and even more so. I mean, Guy only got a couple of pages, but the bravado and the grit of the character really shines through. That even though he only appeared in 2 pages, it carried a lot more weight to me. And then of course there's the scene between Lissa and Sinestro that. Boy, last issue was Guy Gardner naked, and now it's Sinestro naked, and there's some things you can't unsee.
And, and I think you hit it all on, everything, is what's making this great. I think Sinestro's presence in this is great. He's going back to that very terrifying bad guy. For a while, we've come to know Sinestro almost as a sympathetic character in certain regards, especially when it came to Beauregard. And now it's bringing back, he's splitting a guy in half. He's, he's torturing people to fuel this fear engine, which we're still not even sure what the connection is, but I have a feeling we're going to find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
And that's the great thing about this, is that I think we were all nervous about how the Lantern's going to fit in, but we never really thought about if Sinestro was going to be in it, and Sinestro is turning out to be, I think, what is making this a great series right now. I would almost say he's like the main foundation right now of driving this. I think it's great to see Hal coming back, but Hal is these last 2 issues, especially in issue 5, we see a very limited Hal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that, and I don't, whether that's purposeful or not, I think it's great. I mean, think about, we had Sinestro. Think about how Sinestro has come to the forefront, really. But, when they did the New 52, issue number 1 was Sinestro.
Right.
And now and we've kind of got to see Sinestro as a complete character through that run. And now we're here. And I'm finding that Venditti really picked up that mantle. And even from the Sinestro core book, I think he really just took everything over, and it blended so well. And, I think he's really, and again, it's like one of those, you can't really have a great tale of accomplishment unless the stakes are really high, or that the bad guy is going to be really bad. And we're now seeing this with Sinestro. Even his lovemaking with Lissa Drack is kind of like, he's getting scarred up on it. And it's like everything about him is just like, it has to be evil and torturous. And I think that's what is drawing me to this. And I've always been a big Sinestro fan, but I think this is really going to the like great evil that you're going to have to watch them battle. So we're headed towards what's going to be a really cool big battle, and it's not like some one-off faceless enemy. It's somebody we're familiar with, and we're really there's a little bit of you that roots for Sinestro, I think.
You know, I saw an interesting observation online where somebody was talking about the relationship between Hal and Sinestro, and that to Sinestro, Hal is his Joker. And I thought that was such a neat little analogy, that Hal is to Sinestro what the Joker is to Batman. I just thought it was kind of a neat little analogy, but
no, it's not wrong.
No, no. You know, Hal's there and basically creating chaos in his sense of order.
Right.
You know, I think it's really kind of neat. But you know, going back to the scene between Soranik, Natu, and Hal in issue 5, I thought what was nice was that Venditti gives us some character beats with Hal and Soranik, Natu, and then he relies on the Corps to give us the action beats, whereas before it was kind of the other way around. I liked the fact that, you know, Hal and Soranik are sitting there and they have something in common, and that's Sinestro. And the two of them, once they get past the shock of Hal seeing Soranik, Natu in the Sinestro outfit, you really see her open up to Hal and blame herself for what happened in her role. But then you see Hal, knowing Sinestro so well, that he knows how he played his own daughter. And so that knowledge of things, and then the fact that he trusts her by revealing what's happened to him in his time with Krona's Gauntlet, shows a level of trust with her that I think reinforces her and makes her feel a little bit better about her role, because she knows that despite what's happened and despite how people may perceive her, she really is on their side. She really didn't see any of the recourse for herself, and now with Hal back, she does see recourse. And what remains to be seen, you know, she talks about how she kind of repaired Hal, and Hal talks about how the reason why he lost was he was afraid he was going to go Nova on the city they were fighting in. But we still don't know whether Soranik, Natu put anything inside of Hal. You know, we're left to just take it at face value that she's made him better and healed him, but has she done anything else? I don't know. I kind of don't suspect that at this point. But then, you know, you get to the scene after he reveals to her what's going on. I love, by the way, how Ethan Van Sciver and Jason Wright, the colorist, made Hal's translucent hand look so solid and three-dimensional, yet you could see Soranik Natu's face through it. I thought they did a really nice job, and I want to really point that out because I thought that was commendable. But then when they're done, and Hal says, you know, I'm going to blow it all to hell, that was really a nice rousing moment, and then it jumps to John Stewart and the Green Lantern Corps taking off into the cosmos, and you see in that panel where they're leaving Mogo and they're going off into space, you see some characters we haven't seen in a while, like Vaz and like Medfill, and there's even a version of Rotlot Fan based on the movie version of him. I mean, you didn't see him much in the movie. I think he was in like one shot, but that version of Rotlot Fan appears in that one panel where John is, you know, saying every lantern in the air kind of thing. But that those whole last like 7 or 8 pages, my heart was just pounding in my chest because, like, yeah, this is what I wanted to see. You know, the Green Lanterns take off into the cosmos to take on a threat, and Hal ready to throw down. And I'm just so excited for where these last 2 issues are going to take us in this story arc. And then I really have to give it up to them in that last page where you get kind of those 3 shots, one of the Green Lantern Corps, one of Guy being tortured, and one of Hal taking off. And John's dialogue just fits it so perfectly. I thought it was so great. These 2 issues I thought were fantastic, and to me they make up for the issues of the other book.
Oh man, nothing like a backhanded compliment.
Yeah,
but, yeah. So, no, I think it is building. It is a good building up, and again, the stakes are high with a bad guy that deserves the respect of like a whole Green Lantern Corps going after.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be good, and it's going to be interesting because you're seeing the foundations for a lot of other branching storylines. So it's interesting in this series, and I think so. My question to you is, like, was this a good idea? You know, we kind of got a little, maybe we weren't always thinking that the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps title was going to be big enough or be able to handle all the different characters that come with that. And not to say that the Green Lanterns with Jessica and Simon, it's not excusing it, but do you think now that maybe this was like a good idea to put these all together into one book to maybe relaunch another kind of Green Lantern upswing?
Yeah, I don't know. The jury kind of is still out for me. I'm concerned. I read something online recently that some of these books, if not all of them, will go back to monthly after 6 months or so. And it got me to thinking, and I was at the comic shop today talking to Jared, and the owner of the comic shop that we go to, and we were talking a little bit about it. And I said, my biggest concern is if it goes back to monthly, now you've got a book that only comes out once a month and has 20 pages or so. For this book, I think that's going to hurt it if that's what happens to it. I think with a cast of this size, you really need it to be bi-weekly just so that everybody gets the time that they need to, for the fans, for readers who want to see their favorite character. We know that we still have St. Walker to show up. We still have Kyle Rayner's going to show up, and Carol Ferris is going to show up. And now you're even making the cast bigger. Certainly after this arc, I can imagine Sinestro is going to be off the page for a little bit. He's going to be out of the scene for a little while. Mm-hmm. But I get concerned of a cast of this magnitude in a monthly book, because you can do some things when you've got 2 issues in a month. You can afford to give everybody their due a little bit at a time, because you know that you've got 2 issues to get that across to the reader. And so I've got some concern there. Would I still rather have seen it done differently? Yeah, I still would, to be quite honest, at this point. And as much as I'm loving this book, I would still rather see there be 2 series, one being a Hal Jordan Green Lantern book and one being a Green Lantern Corps book, to be honest. But for right now, I'm very happy with the product. And, I look at it this way. I'm getting 2 issues a month that I'm really enjoying. Hopefully that continues that way based on publication schedule. I remember back during the days before Rebirth, we were kind of up and down with Robert Venditti's run, and in talking to him a little bit about some of the behind the scenes stuff, I understand now why some of the things went the way they did, and why some of the plot threads seemed to drop that didn't go exactly the way that they were intended to be. And seeing that he's kind of been given carte blanche, because he's got the entire universe at his disposal. Nobody's saying him from editorial saying, well, you can't use the Green Lantern Corps after he's already started a plot that it uses the Green Lantern Corps. That's not happening. So I think we're seeing the real true potential of Robert Venditti and why he was given this franchise in the first place. And I think, if anything, he got a disservice handed to him by following Jeff Johnson in that New 52 era, when there was a little bit more editorial I don't want to say influence, but interference is probably the better word, than there seems to be right now. And the book is selling well, as obviously the numbers have dropped a little bit for both series since they've launched. And I hope that people see this book as, when I read this book, I feel like there's something important going on in it. I feel like it has meaning. I feel like I'm reading an event, and I know a little bit about what's coming up because I heard some things, and I know a little bit about what's coming up, and I'm excited for what's in store for us for the next several months. So, was it a good thing? Maybe that's where we needed to go to get back to where the franchise supports multiple titles again. I'm hoping we get to that point. I truly would like to see all 4 of the main Earth Lanterns, that being Hal, John, Kyle, and Guy, each carrying their own book. I think they are all capable of anchoring their own book when you put the right amount of emphasis on it. When you give them good creative teams and you give them the same kind of marketing push that we've seen as of late with other characters. This book is selling very well, considering that you don't see a whole lot of marketing from DC pushing the book. When you see an issue or you see graphics for DC, you see the Justice League, which doesn't have any of these characters in it, or you see them showing, when you see any Green Lantern, you see Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz most of the time at this point. So for this book to be doing as well as it is, obviously people are enjoying it, and that's a very good thing. What would it be selling right now if it got more of a marketing push? That'd be interesting to see, because it's selling just as well as the other book is without the marketing. And the other book is the Green Lantern's book is getting the marketing push, and the Hal Jordan book isn't. So it'd be interesting. It would be interesting to see if they really. If they had some really good top-notch creative teams that took on some of these characters and did more with it, could you get back to where it is? I really think it's a shame that, in my mind, DC dropped the ball when Jeff Johns and all those guys left, because they didn't bring in big-name talent to continue it. They stopped giving it the push. And so all that great work they did building the Green Lantern universe up during the Jeff Johns era all kind of went to pot. So,
do you wonder? I mean, do you wonder if it's more of like it was an interim kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Where it's just kind of like, hey, because like you said, people I think knew that when Jeff Johns was leaving, and I'm sure DC was very attuned to this, that Jeff Johns leaving is going to be a big deal. And this happens in sports too, with like coaches and things of that nature. It's like you have that, like, okay, we had such a great run. It's almost like exhausting to say, and it's almost like having a rebound. They could have just stopped Green Lantern at that point. They had to keep running, but they weren't sure the direction they want to go in. So they took some experimentals, and I think Venditti actually worked out in that. I don't think I would say it was great. I think, like you said, he had such a mountain to live up to, but I think he was strong enough to, continue. And they kind of took, I think, a lot of the better things that we liked on that little run between there and kind of brought that all together in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book. Yeah, I don't know if I would, and again, I think that might be just my opinion, that I don't know if it was like, if there wasn't maybe some intentional moves there of saying, hey, we need to take a little time and experiment with things to see what, a long-term direction, and then investing into like an Ethan Van Sciver and stuff like that, because I think it's risky to, if you're going to go into an experimental phase or you're an unsure phase, to like probably pay the higher priced artist, like somebody of Ethan Van Sciver. Now I'm assuming Ethan Van Sciver can demand probably top pay as opposed to maybe some of the artists we saw in there. I mean, his career better than I would.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a marquee A-list artist for DC. So yeah, I'm sure he gets paid a little bit more than maybe his counterparts do, based on his reputation. Because when he appears in a book or does he does the work on a book, it tends to sell a little bit more. It gets a bit of a sales push, a sales bump, because people will buy it for the art, not necessarily. They might buy it even though they don't like the characters. They might be buying it just for the artwork, and some people do that, But very much so. And just in talking of this particular series, I think that we've been given a really fantastic art team between Ethan and Rafa Sandoval. Those two artists, I'm very, very pleased with the artwork in this series, and I'm really pleased with Venditti's work. Like I said, I think that maybe he wasn't necessarily given the best. He wasn't dealt the best hand he could have been dealt, and people were very critical of it, and I was critical of some of those issues as well. But I think we're really seeing his true ability as a writer shine on this series right now. So I'm very, very happy with it.
Oh, and I am as well. And I think Venditti was, well, I mean, what was Venditti known for before he took over Jeff Johns? Was it Exo Manowar?
Yeah, Exo Manowar. Mm-hmm.
So and that wasn't, I don't know what the ratings are. I've never really read it, to be honest with you. So
it was a very well rated, very well received run for Valiant. In fact, he just wrapped up that run over at Valiant Comics.
Oh, okay. So I'm wondering if that was just the decision there. It was like, let's give this writer a shot. He could be here long term, and trying to figure it out, because I think there are some good things that came out of it, and there are some things that, I'm still, like we said, we talked about Jessica Cruz, but overall I think this Hal Jordan's and the Green Lantern book is a good step we needed.
Mm-hmm.
as far as bringing all the characters in there, because it's much easier for everyone to go, especially trying to get new readers to the Green Lantern Corps, to have one book where you're going to get all of that. I do see your apprehension, though, with long term. How long, if this goes to a monthly series, will that have the same effect? But right now, I think it would be if I was going to say, hey, you want to learn, you really want to get to know Green Lantern and jump on, this is a great time to do it.
Right. Yeah, I would recommend the series. And what I did like was, even though, somebody who jumps in may not know the status quo of all the characters, but there's enough of an explanation provided there that you don't need to go back and have read Edge of Oblivion or Lost Army or the Green Lantern book prior to the Rebirth. You could jump in right there and just understand that something happened and go on from there. There's enough context clues to help you out that it's very new reader friendly.
If you're ever in the southern tier of New York and you're looking to satisfy your comic needs, head on over to Heroes Your Mom Threw Out Comic Shop, located at 128 West 14th Street in Elmira. You can also check out their website at heroesyourmomthrewout.com. Stop in and enjoy the most extensive collection of comics in the southern tier of New York. Once again, it's Heroes Your Mom Threw Out Comic Shop in Elmira, New York.
Well, Bill, that wraps up episode 107. So we had some good books to talk about this month and some great listener feedback. You have any parting words or words for the future?
No, not really. Although I would question the substitution of cashews and pistachios. I honestly feel like the flavor would be a lot different, but that's just my opinion. That's how I feel about after the Green Lantern's books. That's what I took away from that.
Are you saying that was a half-baked idea?
Oh, oh, what a pun. No, but everyone, thank you for listening. Do you have another pun?
I was just saying I'm kooky.
I'm kooky. Nice. Well, everyone, thank you very much for listening and always supporting the show, and keep up the comments on Facebook. And Greg, thank you for that information. I think we're all going to look at Hal Jordan a little bit closer from now on. So everyone, have a great night.
Yep. Take care, everyone. And as always, keep your ring charged. Take care of yourself and make every day your brightest day. Take care, guys. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. And Skype users can leave a voicemail on the show's account, Blog of OA. Emails can be sent to greenlantern@stny.rr.com. And you can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Facebook and Google+. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.